Imagine spending your 20s building an empire from nothing, only to watch your blood relatives treat it as a free gold mine. When I saw the balance of exactly $0 on my screen, instead of the 250,000 I expected, I felt no fear. I just heard the death knell of a rotting family. They hid behind warm smiles, completely unaware that their easy prey was actually a hunter setting a trap. Hello, dear listeners of the Haley Revenge Stories channel, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for tuning in today. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely disabled our monetization features, leaving us with absolutely no budget to operate. If you find today's story engaging, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking staff to cover their living expenses and continue creating these stories for you. You can easily donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the PayPal link in the description or the pinned comments of this video. My name is Chloe Griffin. I am 30 years old, and I have spent the better part of the last decade learning how to build impenetrable digital walls. I am a self-made cybersecurity expert, currently working as the Director of Systems at AuraNet Solutions down in Austin, Texas. Austin is a city where tech money flows freely, but you would never guess my net worth by looking at me. I am a highly practical, stoic woman. I drive a reliable 5-year-old sedan. I prefer wearing plain clothes instead of designer brands, and I find comfort in the quiet hum of server rooms rather than loud parties. To me, wealth is about security, not spectacle. I have always kept my financial success completely hidden from the world. My younger sister, Savannah, operates on the exact opposite philosophy. For her, if a luxury is not broadcasted to the world, it does not exist. She is a social media addict whose entire existence revolves around curating a flawless, extravagant aesthetic. She genuinely considers herself the center of the universe. Naturally, she found a perfect co-star in her husband, Travis. Travis loves to introduce himself at dinner parties as a high-stakes venture capitalist. In reality, he is a hollow fraud, a man whose only real talent is talking loudly about cryptocurrency trends and wearing overpriced watches he bought on credit. In the theater of our family, everyone has a designated role. Savannah is the golden child, the beautiful star who deserves the best life has to offer. And me? I am boxed into the role of the boring single sister with the incredibly thick wallet. To them, my bank account is not the result of 80-hour work weeks, late-night coding sessions, and relentless discipline. To them, it is a communal fund. Over the past 5 years, I have been the silent janitor sweeping up the financial messes Savannah and Travis leave in their wake. I have paid off maxed-out credit cards when the collection agencies started calling. I have quietly provided the down payments for luxury cars they absolutely did not need and could not afford. Whenever I tried to set a firm boundary, the family chorus would immediately begin. My mother would look at me with a mixture of pity and expectation, saying, "Chloe, you do not have a husband or children to support. What else are you going to do with all that money? Family helps family." That was the lie they used to dress up their endless greed. Because I chose not to marry or have kids right away, they decided my earnings were public property. They did not see me as a person with my own dreams or future. They looked at me and saw a living, breathing, automated teller machine. It is a profoundly isolating realization, understanding that you are not loved for who you are, but simply valued for what you can provide. The exhaustion of carrying this parasitic weight had been building inside me for a long time, but it reached its absolute boiling point exactly 2 weeks ago. I discovered through a mutual acquaintance that Savannah and Travis had just closed on a massive, sprawling estate in a highly exclusive neighborhood. The mortgage on a place like that would require an income 3 times larger than what Travis pretended to make. I did not need to run a complex algorithm to figure out their plan. They were drowning in debt, living far beyond their means, and they had bought that house with the absolute certainty that my massive savings account would serve as their ultimate life preserver. They were planning to bleed me completely dry to fund their fake lifestyle. And the worst part was, they assumed I was foolish enough to just let them do it. Aunt Beatrice decided that a grand family reunion was exactly what we all needed, booking an incredibly isolated, ultra-luxurious resort nestled deep within the striking landscapes of Sedona, Arizona. The environment was objectively breathtaking. Massive, ancient red rock formations jutted into the clear blue sky, radiating a raw, natural majesty that made you feel insignificant in the best way possible. Yet the vastness of that beautiful desert only served to highlight how suffocatingly narrow and petty the people inside our rented villa truly were. The air inside felt heavy, thick with unspoken demands and fake, high-pitched laughter. I was only there because Savannah had cornered me a month prior, unleashing a torrential downpour of crocodile tears. She wept about how distant we had become, claiming she desperately needed her big sister by her side for family bonding. It was a masterful performance, and I played along, buying my plane ticket because I knew exactly what kind of trap they were trying to set. On the very first evening, we all gathered around a massive mahogany dining table illuminated by flickering candlelight. The feast was extravagant, paid for, of course, by Aunt Beatrice, who loved to play the generous matriarch. Almost immediately, Travis took control of the conversation, treating the family dinner like a pitch meeting for his own ego. He swirled a glass of expensive red wine, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin plastered across his face. "I just do not understand how you do it, Chloe," Travis said, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "Sitting in a dark room, hugging a computer keyboard for 8 to 10 hours a day. It sounds absolutely soul-crushing. You are missing out on the real world." Before I could even formulate a polite response, he seamlessly pivoted to his favorite subject, himself. "The real money is in aggressive, decentralized finance," he boasted loudly, making sure every single relative at the table was listening. "I have a new crypto project launching in under 48 hours. The beta tests are off the charts. We are projecting a minimum of a 300% return on investment within the first quarter alone. It takes vision, you know? You have to be willing to take the big leaps to make the big millions." I nodded politely, cutting into my steak, completely unfazed by his transparent bragging. But while Travis was busy commanding the room, my attention drifted to the woman sitting next to him. Savannah was acting completely out of character. Usually, at these family events, she would be holding court, showing off a new diamond bracelet or loudly complaining about the resort staff. Tonight, however, she looked physically ill. Her normally pristine posture was hunched. She kept her phone hidden under her napkin on her lap, and I noticed the screen lighting up every few minutes. Each time it did, a fresh layer of sweat formed on her forehead. She was obsessively rubbing her clammy hands together beneath the table, and whenever I casually glanced in her direction, her eyes instantly darted away, staring intensely at her plate. The arrogant, untouchable golden child was vibrating with a deep, consuming panic. By 9 o'clock in the evening, the exhausting charade was grating on my nerves. I pushed my chair back and cleared my throat, pasting on an apologetic smile. "I am so sorry to cut the night short," I announced to the table, "but we are having a critical server outage back at the office. I need to get back to my room and handle some system bypasses before the morning." As I stood up, I deliberately fumbled with my small leather handbag, letting it tip forward just enough for the contents to spill slightly onto the edge of the table. A tube of lipstick, a pack of mints, and a sleek metallic hardware wallet fell out. It was a highly specialized, encrypted USB drive used exclusively for storing massive amounts of cryptocurrency offline. I quickly scooped it up, but not before I saw Travis freeze. His eyes locked onto that little piece of metal like a starving wolf spotting an injured lamb. The raw, unfiltered greed radiating from his face was almost comical. I tucked the drive safely into the side pocket of my bag, wished everyone a good night, and walked back to my private suite. I changed into my pajamas, turned off all the lights, and crawled under the heavy duvet. I did not fall asleep. I simply waited. At exactly 2 o'clock in the morning, the faint metallic click of my bedroom door handle turning echoed in the pitch-black room. I kept my breathing slow and even, perfectly mimicking the rhythm of a deep sleep. The door creaked open just an inch, then widened. There were no heavy footsteps, just the soft rustle of clothing and the overwhelming, undeniable stench of the cheap, musky cologne that Travis always drowned himself in. Through the narrowest slit of my eyelids, I watched a dark, bulky silhouette creep across the carpeted floor. He moved straight toward the dresser where I had carelessly left my open handbag. I could hear the faint scratching of his fingers probing the leather lining. A few seconds later, he pulled his hand out. Even in the darkness, I could see the faint glint of moonlight catching the metallic edge of the hardware wallet. The silhouette quickly retreated, slipping back out into the hallway and pulling the door shut with a soft click. I was completely alone again. My bag was empty. My supposed life savings were walking down the hall in the hands of a desperate fraud. Instead of jumping out of bed, screaming for security, or catching him red-handed in the hallway, I simply rolled over onto my side. A genuine, peaceful smile spread across my face in the dark, and for the first time in weeks, I slept incredibly well. The morning sun hit the red rocks of Sedona, casting a warm golden glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main villa. It was just past 8 o'clock in the morning, and the expansive common room was already buzzing with lively, cheerful energy. The rich aroma of freshly roasted coffee beans, sizzling bacon, and sweet maple syrup filled the air. My aunts, uncles, and cousins were gathered around the kitchen island and the plush living room sofas, laughing loudly over some mundane childhood anecdote. It looked like a picture-perfect holiday catalog. I took a deep breath, mentally preparing myself for the performance of a lifetime, and stepped into the light. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, exchanged a few polite pleasantries about the beautiful weather, and sat down at the edge of the breakfast nook. With calculated slowness, I pulled my smartphone from the pocket of my silk robe. I unlocked the screen, tapped the icon for my decentralized asset management application, and waited for the biometric scan to clear. I allowed my eyes to grow wide. I willed the color to vanish from my face, a calculated trick I had rehearsed in the mirror for weeks. I drew a sudden, ragged breath, the harsh sound piercing right through the room's joyful buzz. The silver spoon slipped from my grasp, striking the ceramic counter with a sharp clatter. Fixing my gaze on the screen, I let my hands tremble uncontrollably. Where there should have been a balance of $250,000, the digital readout proudly displayed a flat, devastating zero. "No," I whispered, injecting my voice with exactly the right frequency of raw, unadulterated panic. No, this cannot be happening." Aunt Beatrice stopped mid-sentence, her butter knife hovering over a piece of toast. The laughter in the room died instantly, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable tension. "Chloe, sweetheart, what is wrong?" my mother asked, her brow furrowing with mild concern as she took a step toward me. I looked up, my eyes wide and frantic, scanning the room. "My accounts," I choked out, letting a single, perfectly timed tear spill over my lower lash line. "My offline portfolio. The security node was breached overnight. Everything is gone. $250,000. Just wiped out. My entire life savings, hacked. There is absolutely $0 left." A chorus of gasping and shocked murmurs erupted from the extended family. Aunt Beatrice clutched her chest, murmuring a quick prayer, while my mother rushed to my side, demanding to know how something like this could happen to a cybersecurity expert. But I was not paying attention to them. My peripheral vision was locked entirely on Savannah and Travis. Savannah was seated on a plush velvet stool by the kitchen island. Unlike the rest of the family, she did not gasp. She did not rush over to comfort me. She sat frozen, her face pale and drawn. She picked up her ceramic coffee mug, bringing it to her lips to hide her expression. but her hands were trembling so violently that the dark liquid splashed over the rim, staining her white cashmere sweater. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting frantically to the floor, completely incapable of meeting my terrified gaze. And then there was Travis. He was standing a few feet away, casually leaning his back against the massive stone fireplace. He was holding a glass of fresh orange juice, looking completely relaxed. He did not look shocked. He did not look sympathetic. He looked victorious. A slow, deeply arrogant smirk crawled across his face, pulling at the corners of his mouth. He took a leisurely sip of his juice, letting the panic in the room simmer for a few agonizing seconds before he finally decided to speak. He shrugged his shoulders, a casual, dismissive gesture that spoke volumes. He looked directly into my eyes, shedding the fake family man persona entirely, and let his true, rotten nature shine through. "Relax, Chloe," Travis said, his voice smooth and utterly devoid of remorse. "We needed it more." The words dropped into the room like a heavy lead weight. The chaotic murmurs of the family instantly ceased. The silence that followed was not just quiet, it was deafening. It was a suffocating, heavy vacuum that sucked all the oxygen out of the room. I looked at my mother. She looked away, suddenly finding the grain of the wooden floor incredibly interesting. I looked at Aunt Beatrice. She pressed her lips together, taking a deliberate step back, clearly deciding that intervening was too messy for her pristine vacation. I looked at my cousins, who suddenly found themselves fascinated by the view outside the window. No one screamed at Travis. No one demanded he explain himself. No one asked him to return the stolen money. No one stepped forward to defend me. In that profound, echoing silence, the last remaining threads of my familial devotion snapped. That silence was the absolute, undeniable death sentence for the concept of family in my heart. They were perfectly willing to let me be ruined as long as it kept the peace and kept Savannah happy. I did not scream. I did not throw my coffee mug at his smug face. I did not fall to my knees and beg for my money back. I stood perfectly still, letting the gravity of their betrayal wash over me. I reached up and slowly wiped away the final fake tear from my cheek. My expression shifted from manufactured panic to cold, hard stone. I gave Travis one slow, deliberate nod. Without saying a single word, I turned my back on the entire room. I walked out of the villa, the heavy wooden door shutting softly behind me with a final decisive click. I climbed into my rental car, started the engine, and drove straight down the mountain road, heading directly toward the Sedona police station. The trap was sprung, and now it was time to collect. The Sedona Police Department was a stark contrast to the luxurious warmth of the vacation villa. It was a sterile, highly functional building smelling faintly of strong disinfectant and stale coffee. I walked through the heavy double-glass doors, and the very moment the cool air conditioning hit my face, the final remnants of the terrified, heartbroken victim persona I had been wearing completely evaporated. My posture straightened. My heartbeat, which I had deliberately forced into a frantic, panicked rhythm back at the breakfast nook, returned to a slow, steady resting pace. I approached the front desk, calmly requested to report a major financial theft, and within 15 minutes, I was sitting across a scarred metal desk from Detective Hayes, a seasoned investigator with sharp eyes and a strictly professional demeanor. "Ms. Griffin," Detective Hayes began, clicking his pen and opening a fresh notepad. "You stated to the desk officer that a significant amount of digital assets was stolen from your possession last night. Can you walk me through the exact timeline?" I leaned forward, folding my hands neatly on the table. "Detective, my property was indeed stolen. However, I am not here to ask you to launch a difficult investigation to find it. I am here to hand you the exact location of the stolen assets, the complete digital footprint of the thief, and the high-definition video of the crime taking place. I know exactly who took it, where it is, and exactly how we are going to arrest him." I watched the detective raise an eyebrow, a distinct mixture of skepticism and intrigue crossing his face. This is the part where I must confess something to you, the listeners. You see, when you spend your entire professional career building impenetrable digital fortresses to protect corporate networks from the most sophisticated, hacking syndicates in the world, you develop a very specific kind of paranoia. More importantly, you learn to anticipate the exact moves of malicious actors. I knew my family. I knew their insatiable greed. I knew they were drowning in severe debt over that new mansion, and I knew they viewed me as their ultimate financial safety net. A senior cybersecurity architect does not carelessly drop a legitimate hardware wallet containing her life savings on a dining table and then leave it unguarded in a flimsy handbag while she sleeps. The entire sequence of events from the previous night was a carefully orchestrated piece of social engineering. The account I checked at breakfast, the one displaying a terrifying zero balance, did not hold my actual savings. My real wealth is locked securely behind multi-signature authentication protocols, distributed across several offline cold storage vaults that are not even physically located in the state of Texas, let alone Arizona. What Travis stole was a honeypot. In the realm of network security, a honeypot is a decoy system designed specifically to attract hackers. It looks incredibly valuable. It appears slightly vulnerable, and it is entirely rigged with invisible alarm bells and aggressive tracking software. The device that was taken from my room at 2 o'clock this morning, I explained to Detective Hayes, sliding a sleek black encrypted flash drive across his desk, was a highly modified piece of hardware. I engineered it myself. On the surface, it masqueraded as a standard cryptocurrency ledger. But the firmware was custom written. The moment the thief plugged that drive into his computer, he did not just access a digital wallet. He executed a silent, deeply embedded malicious payload. I watched the detective plug my evidence drive into his secure police terminal. Open the first folder labeled Payload Execution, I instructed. When Travis, sitting in the dark of his own resort suite, connected that drive to his laptop, the malware immediately bypassed his basic, consumer-grade operating system defenses. Within 3 seconds, it silently activated his front-facing web camera. It did not trigger the little green recording light. It simply began broadcasting. At the exact same time, the software initiated a continuous screen recording protocol and mapped his hardware identification numbers. Detective Hayes clicked the file, and a high-definition video popped up on his monitor. There was Travis. The light from the screen illuminated his face, casting a pale blue glow over his greedy, sweating features. The video clearly showed him frantically typing, his eyes wide with adrenaline and unchecked ambition. The screen capture window running right next to his face showed his exact keystrokes as he desperately transferred what he believed to be my entire net worth into his own decentralized wallet. We had his face, his specific device signature, his internet protocol address, and the exact timestamp of the transfer. It was the digital equivalent of catching a bank robber locked inside the vault with the security die pack exploding directly in his hands. But the trap was far more intricate than just a hidden camera. "Let us talk about the money itself," I said, leaning back in my chair and maintaining direct eye contact with the detective. "The sum of $250,000. Detective Hayes looked up from the frozen frame of Travis's face. "You said this was a decoy account. Was the money fake?" "The money was very real in the eyes of the law, Detective, but entirely useless in the real world," I clarified, enjoying the sharp logic of the trap I had built. The assets he stole were not Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any standard liquid cryptocurrency. They were proprietary tokens I minted on an isolated test network. I programmed those specific tokens with advanced tracking smart contracts. A smart contract is essentially self-executing code. I wrote the architecture so that the moment those tokens left my designated wallet, they would broadcast their exact destination to me on the blockchain. Furthermore, they are completely locked. Travis cannot sell them. He cannot trade them. He cannot exchange them for standard fiat currency to pay off his massive mortgage. They have absolutely zero financial liquidity. I paused, letting the profound legal implications settle in the quiet room. However, according to the state penal code, the legal value of those tokens at the exact moment of the theft was definitively appraised at $250,000. Because he transferred an asset with that stated value, with the explicit and recorded intent to permanently deprive me of it, he has committed grand larceny. The fact that the assets are practically useless to him now does not negate the crime of stealing them. The intent, the action, and the execution are completely documented. Detective Hayes let out a low, slow whistle, thoroughly impressed by the inescapable nature of the snare. He scrolled through the rest of the meticulously organized folders on the drive. There were the precise global positioning system logs confirming the exact location of the laptop during the transfer, placing it firmly inside Travis's rented suite at the resort. There was the complete network diagnostic report detailing the flow of data. And just to ensure there is absolutely no possible defense regarding digital spoofing, remote hacking, or someone else using his laptop, I added softly, reaching into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a clear, sterile evidence bag containing my leather handbag. The thief did not wear gloves. He was far too eager, and far too arrogant. If your crime scene technicians dust this, you will find a pristine set of his fingerprints on the inner leather lining of this bag, perfectly corroborating the digital timeline and placing him physically in my room. I had handed the Sedona Police Department an airtight, indisputable, meticulously wrapped present of a prosecution. There was zero room for reasonable doubt. There was no plausible alternate theory of the crime. Travis had walked straight into a digital guillotine of his own making, driven by the exact greed I had weaponized against him. Detective Hayes closed the digital folders, ejected the flash drive, and stood up from his desk. He did not need to consult with a district attorney to know he had a guaranteed conviction sitting right in front of him. The evidence was overwhelming, and the crime of grand larceny for $250,000 was a severe felony carrying significant prison time. "Ms. Griffin," Detective Hayes said, a grim, satisfied smile forming on his face. "I have been doing this job for 22 years, and I have never seen a victim conduct the entire investigation for us before breakfast." He unclipped his radio from his belt and looked at me. "I will have the official arrest warrant authorized by the magistrate within the hour. Let us go pay your family a visit." By the time Detective Hayes and I returned to the resort, it was just past 11 o'clock in the morning. The Arizona sun was blazing outside, but the real explosive heat was about to be unleashed inside the villa. I parked my rental car discreetly behind the main building, allowing the 3 marked Sedona police cruisers to screech to a sudden halt directly at the front entrance. Through the expansive glass doors, I could see the exact scene I had anticipated. Travis was standing in the absolute center of the living room, holding a heavy bottle of highly expensive vintage champagne. He was popping the cork, the golden liquid bubbling over the neck as he raised a grand toast to the gathered relatives. He was undoubtedly celebrating the miraculous overnight funding of his phantom cryptocurrency project. The family was clapping and cheering, completely oblivious to the flashing red and blue lights reflecting fiercely off the living room windows. Suddenly, the heavy wooden doors burst open. 4 fully uniformed officers, led firmly by Detective Hayes, swarmed into the grand room. The cheerful applause died instantly, replaced by a sharp symphony of shattered glass as Travis dropped the champagne bottle onto the hard stone floor in pure shock. "Travis Vance, you are under arrest for grand larceny and wire fraud," Detective Hayes announced, his voice booming authoritatively over the sound of the fizzing champagne. 2 officers flanked Travis immediately, grabbing his arms and forcing them roughly behind his back. The sharp metallic click of the steel handcuffs locking tightly around his wrists echoed perfectly through the dead, silent room. For a split second, Travis was frozen in sheer disbelief. Then, the horrific realization hit him, and he completely lost his mind. He began thrashing and screaming uncontrollably, his face turning a violent, sweaty shade of crimson. "Get your hands off me! This is a massive mistake," he roared, pulling wildly against the firm grip of the officers. As he caught sight of me stepping calmly through the doorway, his frantic panic morphed into vicious, cornered rage. You malicious demon!" he screamed, spitting as he spoke. He looked desperately at Aunt Beatrice and the rest of the terrified relatives, quickly spinning a pathetic, cowardly web of lies to save his own skin. "She did this. Chloe transferred that money to my account on purpose. She is trying to hide her assets from the Internal Revenue Service to evade a massive tax penalty, and she is using me as the fall guy. I am innocent. She set me up to take the fall for her tax fraud." The sheer audacity of his lie was almost impressive, but it collapsed entirely the very moment I walked fully into the room. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue with his frantic, echoing screams. I simply walked over to the mahogany coffee table, right in front of where he was being restrained, and tossed a thick manila folder onto the polished wood. The folder slid open, revealing several glossy, high-definition 8x10 photographs. The top image was the indisputable screen capture from exactly 2 hours and 14 minutes past midnight. It showed Travis clearly, bathed in the pale glow of his laptop monitor, his eyes wide with greed, sitting in the dark of his guest bedroom. The digital timestamp was printed cleanly across the bottom right corner, along with the exact Internet Protocol address matching his specific machine. Travis looked down at the photograph. The color drained from his face so fast, he looked completely bloodless. His mouth opened and closed silently, gasping for air like a fish suffocating on dry land. The arrogant, untouchable venture capitalist vanished in an instant, leaving behind nothing but a terrified, pathetic thief caught entirely red-handed. He stopped thrashing. He was entirely paralyzed by the visual, undeniable proof of his own guilt. With the unshakable truth staring them right in the face, a rational group of people would have apologized to me. Instead, the deeply ingrained hypocrisy of my bloodline reared its ugly head. Aunt Beatrice burst into dramatic, hysterical tears, clutching her pearl necklace tightly. "Chloe, please," she wailed loudly, stepping frantically around the spilled champagne. "You cannot send him to a federal prison. He is family. You have to tell the officers to drop these charges right now." My cousins immediately chimed in, their voices trembling with misplaced panic. "Think about the family scandal. Think about Savannah. You absolutely cannot ruin your own sister's life over money." Money. The very thing they had worshipped just moments prior was suddenly painted as a trivial, meaningless object now that one of their own was facing the severe consequences of the law. Right on cue, Savannah launched into her grand theatrical performance. She threw herself onto the floor, crawling across the damp stone tiles, and wrapped her arms tightly around my legs. She was sobbing uncontrollably, her perfect makeup running down her face in dark, messy streaks. "Chloe, I beg you," she cried out, her voice a flawless imitation of a shattered, innocent victim. "I had absolutely no idea he was doing this. I swear on my own life I did not know. He lied to me too. Please, you have to forgive him for my sake. Do not destroy my marriage. I cannot be punished for his terrible mistakes." She buried her face into my knees, playing the naive, brutally deceived wife to absolute perfection. I stood perfectly still, looking down at the top of her styled hair. I felt absolutely zero sympathy for her tears. I slowly reached down, firmly grabbed her by the shoulders, and peeled her away from my body. I looked her dead in the eyes, my expression a mask of pure, freezing ice. "Savannah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper but sharp enough to slice cleanly through the chaos of the room. "I never intended to sue only Travis." The room went completely still. The fake tears glistening on my sister's face instantly dried up, replaced by a look of profound, primal confusion. She blinked rapidly, her perfectly manicured hands slowly slipping away from my knees as she slumped back onto her heels. Before anyone could utter a single word of protest or ask for an explanation, I reached into the interior pocket of my tailored blazer and pulled out my smartphone. With 3 deliberate, calculated taps on the screen, I accessed the luxury resort's state-of-the-art wireless audio system. The sleek, hidden speakers embedded seamlessly in the high ceiling of the grand living room chimed softly, indicating a successful Bluetooth connection. When my custom payload infected Travis's laptop early this morning, I explained loudly, ensuring my voice carried with absolute clarity to the furthest corners of the room, it did not merely scan the local hard drive for financial data. It was far more sophisticated than that. It actively sought out any paired devices operating on the same localized network. That included the mobile phone currently resting in his front pocket. And through that unsecured backdoor connection, I gained full, unrestricted administrative access to the device's internal microphone cache. I pressed the play button illuminated on my screen. For a tense, agonizing moment, there was only the faint hiss of digital static filling the vast space. Then, a voice echoed down from above. It was not the desperate, weeping, innocent voice Savannah was using just seconds ago to beg for mercy. It was a cold, sharp, and brutally calculating tone. It was the real, unfiltered Savannah. "You have to get that drive tonight," the recorded voice of my sister hissed aggressively from the ceiling speakers. The audio was crystal clear, capturing every inflection of her malice. "The underground debt collectors just called again. They explicitly threatened to chop off my hands if I do not pay back the $200,000 I lost at the tables by the end of the week. I am completely out of time, Travis. Do not mess this up. Just take the drive while she is sleeping. That idiot Chloe is stupid enough for us to fool one more time." The recording clicked off, plunging the room back into a heavy, suffocating silence that felt thick enough to cut with a knife. The explosive twist hit the room like a physical shockwave, destroying everything in its path. The grand, carefully curated illusion of the wealthy venture capitalist husband and the glamorous, successful socialite wife shattered into a million irreparable pieces right before our eyes. Travis was not the criminal mastermind he pretended to be. He was nothing but a pathetic pawn, a gullible fool being entirely manipulated by a desperate, cunning woman. The sprawling new mansion back home, the designer clothes, the extravagant lifestyle they constantly flaunted, it was all a crumbling facade deliberately designed to hide Savannah's severe, illegal gambling addiction. She had carefully orchestrated the entire theft from the very beginning, fully intending to drain my life savings just to keep the violent local mob from breaking her bones. I looked down at Savannah, who was still kneeling on the floor. She was frozen entirely solid, resembling a pristine marble statue of terror. Her jaw hung slack, and her eyes were wide with a fear that was, for the first time in her life, completely genuine. The flawless mask of the innocent victim had violently cracked and fallen away, exposing the absolute selfish monster lurking underneath. Then, the horrifying reality of the situation finally registered in Travis's mind. He realized he had been used as a human shield. He had committed a major felony, risking decades in a federal prison, all because his wife manipulated his massive, fragile ego to cover her own illicit debts. A guttural, animalistic roar of pure fury tore from his throat. With a sudden, explosive burst of adrenaline, he violently shoved the 2 restraining police officers aside and lunged directly across the ruined mahogany coffee table toward Savannah. "You used me!" he screamed at the top of his lungs, his hands reaching desperately and violently for her throat. "You completely ruined my life. I am going to jail because of you." The room immediately erupted into absolute pandemonium. Aunt Beatrice shrieked in unadulterated horror, covering her face with her shaking hands and dropping to her knees. The other relatives scrambled backward in sheer panic, knocking over expensive floor lamps and shattering decorative ceramic vases in their frantic rush to get out of the way of the violence. Savannah let out a piercing, terrified scream, scrambling frantically backward across the floor tiles like a cornered rat facing a predator. Before Travis could wrap his fingers around her neck to exact his revenge, Detective Hayes and his remaining officers tackled him brutally to the hard stone floor. They pinned him down with forceful, practiced precision, pressing their heavy knees firmly into his back until he could do nothing but sob hysterically into the crushed glass and spilled vintage champagne. Detective Hayes stood up, breathing heavily, and straightened his tactical vest. He turned his stern attention to the trembling, whimpering woman cowering by the leather sofa. He reached onto his utility belt, deliberately pulling out a second pair of heavy steel handcuffs. "Savannah Vance," the detective said, his authoritative voice echoing with undeniable power over the chaotic sobbing of the broken family. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit grand larceny, criminal fraud, and active involvement with an illegal gambling syndicate. You have the right to remain silent, and I highly suggest you use it." She did not fight back. She simply collapsed in upon herself, sobbing loudly and pitifully as the cold steel locked tightly around her delicate wrists. As the officers hauled her roughly to her feet, she looked up at me one final time. Her tear-filled eyes silently begged for a miracle, desperately pleading for the older sister who had always bailed her out of trouble to save her just one last time. I gave her absolutely nothing. I offered no anger, no pity, no sadness, and certainly no forgiveness. My face remained a mask of pure, untouchable indifference. I simply turned on my heel and walked purposefully toward the grand front doors. Behind me, the chaotic, pathetic symphony of my broken family reached its ultimate crescendo. Travis was screaming vile curses, Savannah was wailing loudly for our mother, and my relatives were crying over the utter destruction of their pristine, wealthy reputation. I stepped out into the blinding, beautiful Arizona sunlight and took a deep, incredibly refreshing breath of the crisp desert air. I climbed into the driver's seat of my rental vehicle and started the engine. Before I shifted the transmission into drive, I picked up my phone, opened my contacts list, and methodically blocked every single phone number associated with my blood relatives: Aunt Beatrice, my mother, my cousins, and finally, my sister. One by one, I permanently erased them from my digital and physical existence. I drove down the winding mountain road, leaving the smoking ruins of my family far behind in the desert dust, never looking in the rearview mirror even once. 48 hours later, I was back home in Austin, Texas. I was not sitting in a modest apartment or driving a cheap sedan anymore. I was standing on the expansive private balcony of my actual residence, a breathtaking multi-million-dollar penthouse suite located exclusively on the top floor of the city's most prestigious high-rise building. I bought this magnificent sanctuary entirely in cash, using the real, immense wealth that my greedy family never knew existed, safely secured behind layers of unbreakable quantum encryption. I poured myself a large glass of a highly prestigious, aged red wine, swirling the dark crimson liquid gently in the crystal glass. I looked out over the glittering, vibrant skyline of the tech city, feeling a profound, absolute sense of peace settling permanently over my soul. The heavy parasitic weight I had carried on my shoulders for my entire adult life was finally gone. I was permanently free from the leeches who happened to share my genetics. As I took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of the expensive vintage wine, a genuine, radiant smile touched my lips. I realized something incredibly profound right then and there. Cutting all ties with my toxic bloodline was not a tragedy at all. It was, without a single doubt, the most profitable and rewarding investment I had ever made in my entire life. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, from the bottom of my heart, for staying with me and listening to this story all the way to the very end. I would absolutely love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please take a moment to let me know your city and country in the comments section below. If you found today's story entertaining, satisfying, and worth your time, please consider helping our channel out. With our YouTube monetization completely turned off, we are struggling to survive, but a donation of just $1 from you can make a massive difference. You can donate right now by scanning the PayPal QR code currently displayed on your screen, or by clicking the direct PayPal link provided in the description box and the pinned comment of this video. Your generous support directly allows us to pay our dedicated staff, helping them feed their families, and ensures we can continue producing even better high-quality stories for you to enjoy every single week. Thank you again for your incredible kindness, and have a truly wonderful day.